I got a warning at work because I tried to catch the person who kept stealing my lunch and it turned out to be my manager. She got a reaction and had to go to the hospital. I work at a family-owned company, and for the most part, it's been a decent job. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills, well, barely. Things have been especially tight lately since I'm pregnant, which means extra expenses, extra exhaustion, and, most importantly, extra hunger. Seriously, the kind of hunger that sneaks up on you and makes you feel like you haven't eaten in days, even if you had a full meal just a few hours ago. I don't have the luxury of going out to eat whenever I want, so I make sure to pack my own lunch every day. Simple meals, nothing extravagant, just food that will get me through my shift without feeling like I'm going to pass out. At first, I thought I was losing my mind when I noticed my lunch wasn't where I left it. The first couple of times, it was easy to brush off. Maybe I had put it in a different spot, maybe someone accidentally grabbed it thinking it was theirs. Honest mistakes happen. But it kept happening. More and more frequently. Some days, it was completely gone. Other times, I'd open my lunchbox and find half of my sandwich missing, or a fork shoved into my pasta like someone had helped themselves to a few bites and decided they didn't like it. It wasn't just food either, drinks I had barely touched would be gone. I once brought a yogurt, opened it to take a single spoonful, got called away for something, and when I came back, it was gone. Not just missing, completely finished off, spoon and all. At first, I tried to be passive about it. I started putting my name on my lunch, thinking that might make people hesitate before taking something that was clearly labeled. It didn't. I wrote notes. Some were polite, please don't take my food. Some were a little more aggressive, if you eat this, I will find you. None of it mattered. I even resorted to taping my lunchbox shut one time, thinking that would deter whoever was doing it, but the tape was ripped off like it was nothing, and the contents were gone anyway. The worst part was that this wasn't happening to everyone. Sure, every once in a while, someone else would mention that their drink had disappeared or that their sandwich was missing, but it wasn't nearly as often as it was happening to me. It felt targeted. Like someone saw me, pregnant and vulnerable, and decided I was the easiest target. I tried bringing it up to management, but they just brushed it off. It's just food, they said. Maybe someone was really hungry. I was really hungry. Every single day. But that didn't seem to matter. One particularly bad day, I had packed myself a homemade burrito. I had been looking forward to it all morning, thinking about how satisfying it was going to be. When lunch rolled around, I opened the fridge, and it was gone. I don't know why, but that was my breaking point. I had to work the rest of my shift on an empty stomach, feeling lightheaded and on the verge of tears. I ended up hiding in the bathroom for a few minutes just to pull myself together. I had never felt so powerless. That's when I decided I was done being nice about it. I didn't want to actually hurt anyone. As much as I fantasized about catching the thief in the act and dumping my drink on their head, I knew that wouldn't solve anything. But I did want to make them regret it. So I went home that night and made a decoy lunch. It wasn't anything crazy, just a simple dish I would normally make, except this time, I loaded it with cayenne pepper. A ridiculous amount. I don't even like spicy food, so I never use cayenne, but it was the only thing I had in my kitchen that could make the meal borderline inedible without actually harming someone. The goal was simple, make whoever was stealing my food uncomfortable enough to never do it again. The next day, I put it in the fridge like normal. I checked on it periodically throughout my shift, but to my surprise, it was still there by the time I was ready to leave. I sighed, feeling a little disappointed. Maybe the thief had finally gotten the hint. I took it home with me, but the next morning, I brought it back to work, just in case. That day, it disappeared. I knew it was happening the moment I heard the commotion. It started with some coughing, then escalated quickly. People were murmuring, trying to figure out what was going on. And then, to my absolute shock, my manager, yes, my actual boss, was the one rushing to the bathroom, her face red and eyes watering. I didn't put the pieces together right away, but then I overheard someone say, "She thinks she ate something bad." It clicked. I sat there, watching the chaos unfold, my heart pounding in my chest. I had never considered that it might be her. It made sense now, though. She was always one of the first people in the office. She had easy access to everything. She had the power to brush off complaints about food theft because she was the one doing it. Things got serious fast. She wasn't just coughing, her throat had swollen up, and she was struggling to breathe. Someone had to drive her to the hospital, and by that point, everyone was in full-blown panic mode. I just sat there, stunned. I had never intended for it to go this far. I figured she'd take a bite, curse whoever made the food, and move on. I didn't expect an allergic reaction. When she came back a couple of days later, she was furious. She knew exactly whose food she had eaten, and she immediately confronted me. "You did this on purpose," she snapped, pointing a finger in my face. I didn't back down. I crossed my arms and stared right back at her. "You stole my food," I said flatly. "Maybe you shouldn't take things that don't belong to you." She stormed into the boss's office, demanding that I be punished. I had to go in and explain my side of the story, and honestly, I thought they'd understand. I mean, she was literally stealing from me. Repeatedly. Everyone knew it was happening. But no. Instead of disciplining her for theft, they gave me a verbal warning. "You got off easy," they told me, like I should be grateful I wasn't fired. So let me get this straight. Someone repeatedly steals my food, leaving me hungry, miserable, and stressed during a pregnancy, and nothing happens to them. But the moment I do something to defend myself, suddenly I'm the bad guy. I still don't get it. How is it my fault that she ate something that didn't belong to her? If she hadn't stolen my food, she never would have been in that situation. And yet, I'm the one who got in trouble. Update 1. After everything that had happened, after the sheer ridiculousness of it all, I honestly thought that the nightmare was over. The manager had learned her lesson in the most dramatic way possible. The office had been thrown into chaos, people whispering about what happened, speculating on how someone could be so brazen as to steal food, suffer the consequences, and then have the audacity to act like the victim. I thought that was enough. Surely, now that she had felt the consequences firsthand, now that she had literally ended up in the hospital, she wouldn't dare take anything again. So the next morning, for the first time in what felt like forever, I packed my lunch with a sense of security. I wasn't just throwing random things into a bag like before, preparing for the inevitable disappointment of finding my food missing. No, this time I actually put in effort, making a proper meal, something that would actually satisfy the gnawing hunger that had become my constant companion during pregnancy. It felt good. It felt like a win. I walked into work, placed my container in the fridge like I always did, and for the first half of my shift, I didn't even think about it. Why would I? The thief had been caught, humiliated, and had quite literally suffered the consequences of her own actions. No one in their right mind would be stupid enough to pull something like that again, especially not so soon. And yet, when my break finally rolled around, I made my way to the refrigerator with a casual confidence that shattered the moment I opened the door. My container was gone. Not misplaced. Not moved to another shelf. Gone. For a long moment, I just stared, my brain refusing to process what I was seeing, or rather, what I wasn't seeing. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be. After everything. After the hospital visit. After the embarrassment. Who in their right mind would take it again? The disbelief turned to anger so fast it nearly choked me. This was beyond ridiculous. This was targeted. This was personal. The only thing stopping me from yanking the entire fridge off the wall and throwing it across the room was the fact that I was pregnant and exhausted, and more than anything, I just wanted to sit down and eat the food I had spent time making. Food that was now gone. Again. There was only one person who could be responsible. I turned on my heel and stormed through the office, barely containing my rage. I wasn't going to play games this time. I wasn't going to pretend like there was some innocent explanation, like someone had just made a mistake. No, I was going straight to the source. The manager was exactly where she always was, sitting at her desk, eyes glued to her monitor like she had actual work to do. I didn't bother with pleasantries, didn't waste time dancing around the issue. I stopped directly in front of her desk, barely able to keep my voice steady as I asked where my food was. She didn't even look up. That alone made my blood boil, but it was the way she shrugged that really set me off. Just a lazy, indifferent movement of her shoulders, as if the entire thing was beneath her. As if this wasn't something that had been happening for months. As if she hadn't ended up in the hospital because of it. The words that came out of her mouth were so condescending, so smugly dismissive that I almost saw red. I didn't take anything, and you have no right to blame me. The sheer audacity of it was almost laughable. Almost. Because here was the thing, if it hadn't been her before, it was definitely her now. There was no question. No hesitation. I knew with absolute certainty that the person responsible for my missing lunch was sitting right in front of me, acting as if none of it mattered. As if she was untouchable. And then, just when I thought I couldn't be more enraged, she said something else. Something that made my skin crawl. Something that made my hands tighten into fists at my sides. I had enough of your lunch last time. It was so flippant, so casual, as if the hospital trip had just been a mild inconvenience, as if she was joking about it, as if she was untouchable. It was an admission without being an admission, a taunt disguised as an offhand remark. She might as well have looked me in the eye and said, yes, I took your food, and what are you going to do about it? And that was the part that made my stomach twist. Not just the arrogance. Not just the shamelessness. But the fact that she truly believed that this one comment, this little throwaway line, was enough to get her off the hook. I was shocked by such audacity, but what struck me most was her next phrase, I had enough of your lunch last time. It sounded like she admitted to stealing food, but thought it was enough to get rid of suspicion. Update 2. The next morning, I woke up with a clear plan. There would be no more notes, no more confrontations that led nowhere, no more pleading with management to do something they clearly weren't going to do. I was done playing games. If she wanted to keep taking my food, I was going to make sure she lost. I spent the night before searching online for solutions, scrolling through product reviews and security hacks, my frustration bubbling over as I read about other people dealing with the same ridiculous problem. Eventually, I found something that seemed promising. A lunchbox with a built-in combination lock. It wasn't cheap, but at this point, I didn't care. I placed the order, paid for expedited shipping, and by morning, it was sitting on my doorstep, ready to be my first line of defense. I packed my lunch with a sense of triumph, carefully placing my food inside the new container, spinning the combination lock into place, and testing it to make sure it was secure. The weight of it felt good in my hands, solid, impenetrable. This time, no one was getting in. I wasn't just hoping for the best anymore. I was taking control. When I arrived at work, I placed it in the fridge as usual, but this time, I allowed myself a small smirk as I closed the door. Let them try. Let them struggle with the lock. Let them realize they had finally lost. I could already picture the moment, the thief sneaking into the break room, confident as always, reaching for my food only to find that it was sealed tight, completely inaccessible. The frustration. The humiliation. It would be perfect. For the first time in weeks, I actually looked forward to my lunch break. That feeling didn't last. When I walked into the break room hours later, I was already reaching for the fridge door, expecting to see my secure container sitting there exactly as I had left it. But as soon as I opened it, my stomach dropped. My breath hitched in my throat. It was gone. Not just missing, violently taken. The lock, the one I had carefully secured that morning, lay on the shelf, snapped clean off, the broken pieces scattered like a mockery of my attempt at control. Someone hadn't just stolen my food. They had pried it open with sheer force, determined to get inside no matter what it took. I felt a slow, creeping heat crawl up my neck, my hands clenching into fists as I stared at the empty space where my food had been. This wasn't just theft anymore. This wasn't someone absent-mindedly grabbing the wrong container or taking a sip of someone else's drink because they got confused. This was deliberate. This was personal. This was someone making sure I knew they couldn't be stopped. That was the last straw. I didn't move for a moment, just stood there, letting the realization settle over me, my pulse pounding in my ears. This wasn't going to stop. No matter what I did, no matter how much I tried to protect myself, whoever was doing this wasn't going to back down. They had already decided they could do whatever they wanted, and they were proving it to me over and over again. Fine. If they wanted to make this personal, then so would I. I turned on my heel and walked straight out of the break room, my entire body thrumming with barely contained rage. I wasn't going to confront the manager this time, wasn't going to waste another second arguing with someone who clearly didn't care. No, this time, I was going to find out exactly who was doing it. The next day, I came prepared. I packed another lunch, locked it up again, not because I thought it would stop them, but because I wanted to see if they would take the bait. I placed it in the fridge like usual, but this time, I didn't leave it unattended. I pretended to work, but I was listening. Every footstep near the break room, every time someone opened the fridge, I paid attention. And then, when lunch rolled around, I quietly slipped out of my seat and positioned myself in the hallway, just out of sight of the fridge. My heart pounded as I waited, anticipation twisting in my gut. I didn't have to wait long. Minutes later, I saw her. Sarah. She walked into the break room like she had done it 100 times before, her movements quick and precise. She glanced around, checking to make sure no one was watching, then opened the fridge. I held my breath as I watched her reach inside, her fingers wrapping around my container like it belonged to her. My stomach twisted. I had never even considered Sarah before. She had always been quiet, polite. One of the few people who had given me sympathetic looks whenever I mentioned my food going missing. She was friendly, nice in a distant kind of way, the type of coworker you make small talk with but don't think about much after the conversation ends. But here she was, standing in front of the open fridge, my lunch clutched in her hands, looking over her shoulder like a guilty thief. And then, before I could even process what I was seeing, she turned and walked away. Not to her desk. Not to a secluded corner to eat in secret. She walked straight down the hall. Straight to the manager's office. Something inside me snapped. I barely hesitated before following her, my blood boiling, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. My heart was hammering in my chest. This was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. As soon as I stepped inside the office, I saw it. Sarah, standing there, my container held out in front of her. The manager sitting behind her desk, reaching for it like it was hers. My pulse pounded in my ears. Sarah. I said her name before I could stop myself, the shock making my voice sharper than I intended. She jumped, nearly dropping the container, her face going pale as she turned to face me. She looked like a deer caught in headlights. I demanded to know what she was doing. She stammered, her fingers tightening around the container like she could somehow make it disappear if she just held it hard enough. She took a step back, as if she could physically distance herself from what she had been caught doing. Her gaze flickered to the manager, searching for help, for guidance, but for once, the manager didn't have that smug expression on her face. She wasn't untouchable anymore. She just sat there, silent, watching the scene unfold. Sarah swallowed hard and said it wasn't her. She just did what she was told. I demanded to know what she meant by that. Her hands trembled as she gripped the container, her knuckles going white. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She shook her head quickly, as if she was afraid to even speak. I stepped forward, pressing her, demanding an answer. And then, she broke. She said the manager had asked her to do it. The words tumbled out of her mouth in a frantic rush, like she wanted to get them out before she lost the nerve. She didn't look at me, didn't look at anyone, just kept her eyes on the floor as she admitted it. The manager had told her to bring her my food. Every time. She hadn't wanted to. She had tried to refuse. But, her voice wavered, she had to. Otherwise, she trailed off, but I didn't need to hear the rest. I already knew. She said I had to bring her your food, otherwise. Sarah didn't finish, but it all became clear to me anyway. Update 3. I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest, my breath coming out in shallow, angry bursts. The manager, sitting so casually behind her desk, didn't even look remotely guilty. She wasn't scrambling for an excuse, wasn't even trying to hide what she had done. No. She had the audacity to shrug, as if she had done nothing wrong. As if hiring Sarah to steal my food was the most normal thing in the world. And then she spoke. The words hit me like a slap to the face. She didn't apologize. She didn't deny it. She simply stated, as if it was a fact I should have already understood, that I worked for her, and that meant it was normal that I should feed her. Like it was part of my job description. Like my carefully packed lunches, my meals meant to get me through long shifts, the food I spent time and money preparing, were somehow hers by default. And then, the final insult, the cherry on top of this absurd situation, she actually had the nerve to compliment my cooking. Something in me snapped. I stood there, my hands clenched at my sides, trying to process the absolute insanity of what I was hearing. I wanted to scream. I wanted to reach across her desk and dump an entire bottle of cayenne pepper into whatever coffee she was drinking. I wanted to demand answers, to make her understand how twisted and insane her logic was. But I didn't. I said nothing. I simply turned around and walked out of her office. There was no point in arguing. She didn't care. She had never cared. If anything, she was irritated that I had caught her, not remorseful. She wasn't going to stop because she suddenly understood that stealing was wrong, she would only stop if it became inconvenient for her. So I made my decision. I wouldn't bring food anymore. That night, I went home and sat in my kitchen, staring at my empty lunchbox. I had spent so much time carefully preparing meals every morning, making sure I had something nutritious to get me through my shift. It was a routine, something I did automatically. But now it just felt pointless. So the next day, I didn't bring anything. Instead, when my break rolled around, I went out and bought lunch. Something simple, something I could eat quickly, but most importantly, something I didn't have to store in the office fridge. I ate it immediately, right there in the break room, taking my time, enjoying every bite. And when I was finished, I threw away the packaging and left nothing behind. No food in the fridge. No container to steal. Nothing. The first day, nothing happened. The second day, I felt a shift. By the third day, I knew I had thrown a wrench into her routine. That evening, as I sat at home unwinding after work, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, and my stomach twisted with disgust when I saw her name. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. The message was short, blunt, and filled with the entitlement that made my blood boil. She told me I needed to start bringing food again. She couldn't be expected to think about it herself every morning. I stared at the screen, stunned at her sheer gall. She wasn't even trying to manipulate me, wasn't bothering with fake politeness or some half-baked excuse. No, she was outright demanding that I resume my role as her personal, unpaid chef. I didn't respond. The next day, I did the same thing. I bought my lunch, ate it right away, left nothing behind. More messages came. Each one was more irritated than the last. She tried different approaches, annoyance, sarcasm, even passive-aggressive jabs about how I was being selfish. That one almost made me laugh. Selfish. As if I was somehow in the wrong for not allowing her to steal from me anymore. I never replied. After a few days, the messages stopped. And just like that, it was over. Update 4. The shift in the office was almost immediate. It was subtle at first, but I noticed it. Everyone noticed it. The manager, the same woman who had once sat behind her desk with an air of untouchable arrogance, the woman who had stolen from me for months without an ounce of guilt, the woman who had treated my meals as part of her unspoken privileges, was suddenly struggling. It started with her arriving late to work. Before, she had always been one of the first people in the office, sipping on her stolen breakfast, acting like she was above the rest of us. But now she was barely making it in on time. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. Maybe she had hit traffic, maybe she had overslept. But then it kept happening. Day after day, she was coming in later and later, rushing to her desk, looking stressed and irritated. And then I realized why. She had to cook for herself. For the first time in what was probably years, she had to wake up early, stumble into her kitchen, and actually prepare her own food, food that wasn't just waiting for her in the office fridge, food that wasn't pre-made and ready to be stolen. And the best part? She wasn't very good at it. She tried, I could tell. The first few days, I saw her eating sad, overcooked eggs at her desk, her expression tight with frustration. Then, a dry sandwich, slapped together without care. Once, I even saw her poke at a container of what I assume was supposed to be pasta, but it was so undercooked that she could barely chew it. It was glorious. I could see the struggle written all over her face. She was used to having someone else do the work, used to having perfectly packed meals handed to her like she deserved them. Now, she had to wake up early, stand over a stove, deal with dishes, plan her meals, and it was clear that she absolutely hated it. It didn't take long before she started skipping homemade food altogether. One afternoon, I watched as she huffed her way out of the office during lunch, clearly annoyed, clearly starving. She had given up on making food at home and was now spending her breaks buying meals. I saw her return with takeout, overpriced sandwiches from the cafe down the street, gas station snacks hastily thrown together to hold her over. It was almost sad. Almost. But the best part? The true cherry on top of all of this? Her colleagues, the same ones who had been quietly watching all this unfold, the same ones who had seen her take my food without a second thought, were now making her pay for it, literally. She must have thought she could fall back on them, that she could just casually ask for a bite of their meals, maybe even guilt them into sharing. After all, it had worked before, right? She had gotten away with so much for so long. Why should things be different now? But they were different. Because everyone knew what she had done to me. And no one, not a single person, was going to let her mooch off them for free. I overheard it more than once, her hesitating, standing awkwardly by someone's desk, asking if they could spare something. And every single time, the response was the same. Sure, but it'll cost you. Oh, you need lunch? That's funny. I have an extra sandwich, but I did spend time making it. How about $10? 10. That's a bit steep, don't you think? I mean, I could lower it to 8, but then again, I did put a lot of effort into it. Up to you. And she paid. She didn't have a choice. I could see it on her face, the sheer irritation of having to hand over money for something she once took freely, the reluctant pull of her wallet, the way her lips pressed together as she forked over the cash. I had never enjoyed my lunch breaks more. Every single day, I sat at my desk, peacefully eating the lunch I had bought myself, savoring every bite, knowing that the woman who had once treated me like her personal chef was now paying triple the price just to eat. And I never, not once, let her forget it.